What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another player breakdown. Now in today's video, we are going to be discussing Tyreek Hill, Tyreek the Freak himself. We're super pumped to be bringing you this breakdown on Tyreek Hill. I know some of you are still unsure on if you want to draft him or if you don't, so stay tuned for that. But before we do, real quick, if you were unaware, we have a website. It's thefantasyfootballadvice.com. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you do so today. We have all of our rankings available for download. Sometimes when you're watching some of these videos, things change, but we make sure to update those on the website. You can also purchase our premium rankings, which are based off of tiers. They also have a breakdown of each player and risk ratings for them with projections. On top of that, we have an exclusive offer for you from Pro Football Focus. If you want to get a discount on their Elite and Edge packages, follow the information in the description box and use that promo code. This is a deal that no one else can get you. Now that's enough about that. Let's jump into this week's player breakdown on Tyreek Hill. So to start, Tyreek Hill is undoubtedly making a name for himself as one of the most athletic and explosive players in the entire NFL. He has now already made the Pro Bowl and even receiving first team All-Pro honors as a punt returner in just his rookie year. He is definitely the type of player that you want to have on your fantasy roster just so that way you can watch him when it comes to game day. He'll keep you glued to your seat because if you aren't paying full attention, you can miss a big play at any moment. He is super explosive. So to start this player breakdown, we're going to dive into his 2016 production, identify what is different coming into the 2017 season, and finish with our projections for Hill and if we think he is of value for you or not on draft day. So to start for 2016, Hill had a modest receiving stat line, 61 receptions, 593 receiving yards to go along with 6 touchdowns. He also added 267 rushing yards on 24 attempts, which resulted in an additional 3 touchdowns. Then he had a whopping 976 return yards for another 3 touchdowns on top of that. It doesn't take a fantasy expert to know that that is truly impressive numbers by any standard, let alone a rookie. Hill's impact was really felt on the field. Anyone watching the Chiefs games last year know he put on a show in almost every game. The fans were literally chanting his name in the stadium. The Chiefs used him in a ton of different ways, and to score 12 touchdowns as a rookie is really something, especially considering the way he got it done. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that he did return a lot of balls. So if you are in a league where you get bonuses for return yards, don't expect Hill to be that guy for you this year. He should not be returning any balls in 2017. The Chiefs have already came out and said that they aren't using him in that way, and even in the odd chance that they did, the opponents already know better than to kick him the ball at all. Any opportunity he has in that aspect would result in a touchback or a fair catch. So excluding special teams, Hill was still very much involved in the passing game, especially towards the end of the season. The splits from the first 8 games, he averaged 3.5 targets per game. Now in the second half of the season, the final 8 games, he just about doubled that, coming in just a hair under 7 targets per game. What's clear is that this offense started to understand the talent that they had in Hill, and they realized that they had to get him more involved. Obviously, Jeremy Maclin, who made a name for himself as that #1 veteran receiver, was the person taking the largest hit in this transition. Maclin went from receiving 37 targets in his first 4 games to receiving less targets than Hill in 3 of their final 4 games. If we were a little more receptive, we may have even seen the writing on the wall at that point. Regardless, Tyreek Hill averaged just 9.7 yards per reception, which is on the low end, but considering that they used him mostly for screen passes mixed in with a few deep shots here and there, it was actually to be expected based on his role. Which also makes it a little less surprising that Tyreek Hill was tied for 5th in the NFL for the highest percentage of catchable balls he had thrown his way, clearly based on the short passing game narrative that he was in. Now as for his ground game, on paper, it seemed as though his rushing yardage and touchdowns were something that could really put this player over the top for fantasy purposes. I mean, realistically, not many other wide receivers had the amount of opportunities that he did on the ground, well maybe with the exception of someone like Tavon Austin, which you should be able to translate to give you an advantage going into your fantasy week, having a wide receiver taking snaps from the backfield. Well, in reality, it may be a little deceiving because 61% of his rushing yardage came in just 2 games, and 2 of his 3 rushing touchdowns also came in those same games. The bottom line is, Hill had just a magic way of getting it done each week somehow, some way. Maybe one week it would be a return touchdown, Another, it'd be a rushing touchdown, and then the week after that, he'd be catching a long TD pass. Don't get me wrong, I love Tyreek Hill, especially as a football player. I may even take him come draft day. But the thing is, Tyreek Hill ranked first in fantasy points per touch. Really, just on his unique playmaking ability alone. He didn't rack up many receptions, nor rushes, but he did have a ton of touchdowns based on being a superior athlete. Now, coming into 2017, the news has been made very clear. Tyreek Hill is going to be the team's #1 receiving option, now that Maclin has exited and moved over to Baltimore. If you ask me, while Hill is still a game-breaking talent, in my eyes, he is still a gadget player. The problem is he has only had 31 receptions in college. He did nearly double that in his first season in the NFL, catching 61 balls. But how can you be so sure that a player who has caught a total of 91 balls in the past 3 years is automatically going to be a slam dunk pick? One thing I do know is that Andy Reid is a fan of Hill and sees him as an important piece of this team's future. Reid is a great coach, and if he released Maclin, who we all know he loves, he even drafted Maclin out of Philly, that really tells you something. And it tells you what his plan is for Hill in the future. He's going to be a big part of this Chiefs offense. Now, Tyreek, a player who led the league in fantasy points per touch, it's no secret that you need to get the ball in his hands and as much as possible. That's what they did last year, but it seems like this year, although they will try that, most of his reps are going to be as a receiver. And limited work as a receiver, Hill did look sharp. His routes were effective, not all because of his speed, but also due to his route running ability. I don't think that he would be given the reins to be the #1 wide receiver if he didn't show his ability to run all these routes. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that he is definitely going to struggle against coverage from a #1 corner. More specifically, press coverage over anything else. Hill is a smaller receiver, and if he's nudged or shoved when he bursts off the line, he may not be able to utilize his 4.3 speed to break away. Now, he shouldn't find himself in all that many situations like that on every snap, and should still have a fair amount of rushing attempts each game, but these are all things you have to factor when taking a wide receiver early. A lot of people have been asking about the QB situation. Do you give him a boost if Alex Smith is there because of the short passing game? Does he get a boost if Mahomes is the quarterback? If you ask me, I think it's really irrelevant. Hill is the type of player he can produce with both Alex Smith and Mahomes if need be. I may even give it a slight bump if Mahomes does end up taking the reins, because Alex Smith has proven that he's just not a guy that takes a lot of shots. Mahomes, on the other hand, could be that guy. He could be a gunslinger style of quarterback. Obviously, Alex Smith is slated to start the whole season. We don't know what's going to happen. If there's an injury, just one thing to keep in mind, but it shouldn't deter you in one way or the other come draft day. Well, without kickoff and punt returns last year, Hill would have had a stat line of 61 receptions, 860 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That would equate to about wide receiver 25 last year, which was, as we know, on a whole, a down year for wide receivers. Barring injury, he is almost guaranteed to match that production coming into the 2017 season. He's coming in at ESPN 56 overall, wide receiver 27, fantasy football calculator, 43rd overall, wide receiver 22. Now, if I'm saying last year he could have been wide receiver 25, that puts him right smack dab in the middle of those ADPs. So essentially, I think you're almost a lock to at least retain value, but it's no way a home run pick. Normally with receivers, we don't really project them at, 9, 10, 11 touchdowns unless they're one of those elite guys like an Antonio Brown, maybe an Odell Beckham. But I believe Tyreek Hill is definitely a strong candidate to repeat his performance in the touchdown area, maybe get a slight decrease from 12 because he's not going to be playing special teams, but I think that he'll make up for it in other areas. Hill is definitely not the type of player that you want in your wide receiver 2 spot. He's a great best ball player, but he's somebody you really want in the flex. Reason being is because some of the weeks that he plays in, yardage may not be there. I do think that he's the type of player who will be able to get double-digit touchdowns with a split rushing and receiving. They use him a lot in the red zone, and his big playability just means that a breakaway is basically going to happen. But the yardage, they're going to have their best coverage on him. They already have another year of tape on him. These are things you have to keep in mind. Increased target share may sound good on paper, but when losing a player like Maclin and you know what they're going to do and you know they're going to feed Tyreek Hill, believe me, they're going to be ready for it. So when drafting him, what would we recommend? We would definitely recommend targeting him at about wide receiver 30. We can't fault you for taking him anywhere between 25 and 30. We just recommend that you really don't reach on him. Just let him fall to you. If he is there on your draft board as a mid to back end wide receiver 3 and you're on the board, you definitely have to take him. However, I know that I personally have mentioned Hill in my home league, and it seems like everyone in the league values him as a mid to high end wide receiver too, so there's probably no chance that I'm going to get him there. But one thing is for sure, I definitely will have my eye on this player on draft day, and if he falls to me, I won't hesitate to pull the trigger. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. That's going to do it for today's player breakdown on Tyreek Hill. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're as pumped for football as I am. It's coming up in a few weeks, so make sure that you're prepared. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. We post videos 5 days a week, and that's not going to stop until the season starts. So if you could, toss this video a like, and we will catch you on the next one.